look at it, you can see how large it is. It's probably thousands of years old. This olive tree was probably there at the time of Jesus, how large it is. And you can see even on that olive tree how over the course of time there have been branches which have been cut off and other branches which have started, which even to this day bear fruit. Do you see how this works in the life of an olive tree? Now, if you look at verse 1 of Isaiah chapter 11, a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, and from his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Hebrew word for branch is the word netzer. Netzer. There will be a netzer that will bear fruit. And if you begin to look at the Old Testament, you'll find that there are this whole slew of prophecies that are related to this at the time of exile. So Jeremiah, also a prophet who is a contemporary with the exile. In fact, he spent time warning people that the exile would take place and then also prophesied after all these events had happened. And he says in his prophecy, "The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up to David a righteous branch, a king who will reign wisely and do what is just and right in the land." And so although Jeremiah had in mind this idea that this tragedy has happened and this branch has been cut off, he says there's going to be another branch. It's going to come and it's going to bear fruit. In chapter 33, he says something very similar. In those days and at that time, he's speaking on behalf of God, I will make a righteous branch from the sprout of David's line. He will do what is just and right in the land. If you study the Old Testament, you find there are more prophecies in Isaiah, there are more statements in Jeremiah, in the Old Testament book of Zechariah. There's all these statements about how there's going to be this new branch, this new netzer that's going to come up. Okay, so a little bit about history. So you're sitting in Ramah on those dusty streets. This is about 586 BC, so 586 years before Jesus is born. And you're sitting there on the streets, and you're hauled away into a foreign land and all your people with you. A number of years later, the first trickle of people come back. But a whole bunch of the Jewish people remain in Babylon, in Assyria. They've been carted away. And although some people come back within 60, 70, 80 years, the majority are still over there in Babylon. Now, Israel is a country, as you probably know by now, that was occupied by a whole number of foreign forces. They were occupied by the Assyrians. They were occupied by the Babylonians. After that, they were occupied by the Greeks, and then at the time of Jesus, by the Romans. About 160 years before Jesus was born, the nation of Israel was occupied by the Greeks. And the Jewish people had had enough. And there was a family known as the Maccabees. Have you heard of them before? Ever hear that name? The Maccabees. They rose up as leaders in the nation of Israel, and they fought against the Greeks and drove them out of their land. And at that time, there were people who were living in exile in Babylon or in Assyria or in some other place who decided, you know what, let's go back to the land of Israel. And there was a particular family in the line of David who, when they came back, they established a town. And because they believed that at some future point, they read the Bible, they would read these passages in Isaiah 11, they believed that out of the stump of David, their family, there would be new life, there would be a shoot. They came and they settled in a town, and they named that town Netzareth, Branchville. This was a family who believed these words, that one day in Netzareth, Branchville, there would be this shoot that comes up. Okay, so some of you remember the Christmas story in Luke chapter 2, right? In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. And everyone went to their own town to register. And then it says, so Joseph, along with Mary, went up from Nazareth, their hometown, to Bethlehem, to the town of David, because they belonged to David's line. Here, in this small town of Shootville, Branchville, Nazareth, was this family that lived there, that believed at some point this future branch, this future king, this future new life would come. They had this faith because they read the scriptures, and they settled in this place. They called it Branchville because they said, one day this branch is coming. One day this branch is coming. And so, when Matthew writes about the amazing events of Jesus' life, he is blown away by the fact that at some point, Jesus, after he comes up out of Egypt, is brought into Netzerville, Branchville, and he says, this fulfills what the prophet said all along. He will be called a Netzarim. He's the branch. He's the one. So Matthew's saying, all the Old Testament, it points right to Jesus. And so when you see this picture of this new life coming up out of the stump, this is the picture that Matthew has of Jesus. Out of the stump of David, this whole line of kings, there is now this new king who's shot up. And he is going to bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord is with him. Do you see that? So Matthew's just, do you guys get this? He says, this is what happened. All the prophecies were fulfilled. Jesus is the new branch that they all talked about. And he's blown away by the fact that this is where he went to live. You guys see that? Isn't that cool? All right, so this picture, I think, when I took this picture, I thought this is great. In the background, you know where I'm standing? I'm standing in a place. Right behind me is a ancient city called Sepphoris. And in front of me, beyond the tree, you see it there, modern-day Nazareth. That time was just a very small town, but now it's a large city. But there's Nazareth, and right behind me is Sepphoris. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about this city, because when you see this, I mean, it's just so great what God did through his plan to bring everything into this perfect way of being. So Jesus lives in Netzerville, Nazareth, right up there on that hill. And right behind me, as I take this picture, is the ancient city of Sepphoris. If you're in Matthew chapter 2, it talks about how Herod died, and then his son Archelaus is ruling in Jerusalem. Actually, what happened, when Herod died, his kingdom was divided into three. And three of Herod's sons got various parts of that kingdom. So in the east, his son Philip got some of the land to the east. In Judea and Jerusalem, Archelaus, his son, became king. And to the north, Herod Antipas became ruler or king in Galilee. And when he got that territory, Galilee, as his kingdom, he decided that he would make his capital city be in Sepphoris, which is the city that's right behind me as I take this picture, and there is Nazareth. As we were there, we had an opportunity to tour the city. Unbelievable amounts of wealth and riches. Here's a picture of the city street, the main city street. It was paved. There's plumbing underneath. And they're starting to excavate all the homes that were there and the shops along the city street. In one home, just to give you a sense of the kind of wealth that was there in Herod Antipas's capital city, you see this tile fresco. I mean, these little marble pieces done in, unbelievable detail. There was tremendous amounts of wealth in this town. In this town, there's this theater. They've restored some of the bottom of it. It went up much, much higher. When you're sitting in that theater, you overlook this valley. It's a beautiful scene. Unbelievable amounts of luxury and wealth in this city. Now, I told you that after Herod the Great died, Herod Antipas decided to build this city as his capital city. Who do you think did the work? Right outside the city, there's a rock quarry, and Nazareth